This is Karen with newclevelandradio.net, and it's time for the Intentionality Gurus with Candace Pollock. And I think I'm losing my voice. We want to welcome you back to the Intentionality Gurus, where we explore the hidden drivers of our thoughts, behaviors, and choices, and how to align them with what really matters. Today's episode is about a powerful, invisible force that's pulling the strings behind your focus, your cravings, your procrastination, and even your motivation to achieve your biggest goals. It's called incentive salience. And whether you've heard of it or not, it plays a big role in your life. In this episode, we'll unpack what is, how it's been hijacked by modern life, and most importantly, how you can start using it intentionally to spark momentum, resist distraction, and move closer to your deeper goals. Wow, how did you know I needed this? Because I've been hijacked for the last week.
Well, I think I've got you. I feel like I've been hijacked for the last 3 weeks.
Okay.
Compete with you on that score. But really, a bunch of things have gotten in the way, and I was, paying attention to it, just noticing, and then I remembered this concept of salience. So it's not a word we use in everyday life, but basically it means something that catches our attention, is noticeable, conspicuous, and so on. So you could think of a stop sign, or you could think of maybe a geological feature on a highway, and you know that, well, there's a water tower near where, when I'm commuting from downtown to my house, and I know that I have to merge at a particular point there. And I have until that water tower before I need to merge into fewer lanes.
Okay.
So think of some salient elements in your life, things that you notice and you find yourself automatically doing something. What might show up for you?
That's a good question. I'm not prepared for that. Um,
So for somebody who smokes, it might be the side of a cigarette package.
okay.
I think they still have those. I don't know. It might be a time of day, noticing it's, a break time, and when somebody used to do smoking. For somebody who drinks, and I don't want to just pick on those kinds of habits, but for somebody who drinks, it might be the sight of, I don't know, a glass that has a particular kind of alcohol in it. I can't think of what that may be. But just something that triggers your attention. And then it's in that little moment of, it's not the doing of the habit that is the grabber, it's the anticipation of the reward or the relief from the thing that we do that
Okay.
is releasing this chemical dopamine in our system that anticipates getting the reward or the relief. So anything like that come to mind for you?
No, I just have too much stuff going through my brain all the time.
Well, I think if you notice, you'll notice. All right. So if you start paying attention, you'll start seeing, oh, there's this cue, that cue. So for instance, during the day, I have food windows, and I eat, during the day, and then I cut off food before and after certain times. I just played this little game with myself. And I find I feel better when I do that. But if I were to I had a container of sesame seeds within view of my desk during the day. And darn it all, didn't I have this craving for sesame seeds? And I wasn't really hungry. It was the visual cue. It was something that reminded me of, oh, there's this thing that I enjoy. So it would be something like that. All right. And I'm sure we all have them, but the point is, we go through life not necessarily paying attention. These are
Right.
automatic things that are occurring. So this incentive salience is incentivizing us to either do a good habit or a bad habit, or, maybe we shouldn't even give it those characterizations, but something that is taking us towards our goal or taking us away from our goal. So
Too
some
many
thoughts
things,
there.
yeah, too many things have been taking me away from my goal. And I think I better start paying attention to figure out what those are.
Yeah, because they're very subtle and they're the kind of things, I there's one intersection that I pass not frequently, but enough times that the foliage kind of covers the stop sign. And if I didn't do that path as often as I do, not daily, but as often as I do, I could easily not see that stop sign
Okay.
because it's obscured. But now I've learned to, this isn't necessarily salience, but I have made that connection with, I guess, the foliage and one of the streets coming up. It has a funny name, and then I remember, oh, okay, this is the place where that stop sign. I have to remember it. It's there because it's not an obvious intersection. So, we can just be noticing. That's
Okay.
something that we always talk about in this podcast. And it's not necessarily liking and wanting, it's that anticipation that is hooking us on some level. It doesn't have to be like a strong liking or wanting or anticipation, I should say. So again, it could either be because we're going anticipating a reward or anticipating relief from some, anxiety or tension. So think about scrolling on our phones. That often is in anticipation of maybe getting some relief from some anxiety that or stress we're dealing with in the moment.
Right.
I find sometimes when I'm overtired, it's hard for me not to be scrolling through emails. I try to avoid it most of the time and only deal with it during certain times of the day. I had to give up the news, but every once in a while I'll see a headline. I do read the online newspapers, but not the online news because it just keeps me going. It keeps me going. It keeps me
Right.
going and totally disrupts my sleep. So the idea, in terms of what salience is, it's just literally the word noticing or something, something conspicuous, something that stands out. And then the incentive part is to either seek the reward or relief. So in our daily life, we've got social media, that's a biggie. We have foods, that are very tempting.
Right.
I don't normally eat sweets, even though my name is Candy. I didn't name myself. My sister named me. It was one of her favorite things. And I don't know why my parents went with it, but they went with it. But craving potato chips, for
Yeah.
instance, every once in a while, if I see a potato chip bag, I might remember, how great they were. And I have to do, like a mental override, but the little trigger is still there. And then, how do we use these in terms of our self-sabotaging habits, the way they get in our way? And just being aware of there's a little fork in the road. You can just notice, oh, there I go with the salience. It's the trigger, or just, scan the horizon literally and figure out what that trigger was. It might be a song, it might be an aroma or other smell. I always have a little sense of relief when I have a little smell of lavender.
Okay.
And often they use it for in sachets and those kinds of things to induce sleep because it has a soothing element to it. So, what shows up at this point, if anything?
You know, I just feel overwhelmed. Um, it's like not one particular thing that is throwing me off track. Um, I feel like I'm missing out right now.
Missing out, meaning
Well,
there's
missing out
more
because
for you to
these
do.
things are going through my brain. It's stopping me, but I have not paid attention to it other than knowing I'm being stopped.
All right, so that you are not, the overwhelm is keeping you from doing what you feel you need to be.
Doing, staying on task.
Okay.
I've been finding myself, especially this past week, I will start on a task and something is hijacking me. Haven't paid attention to what it is. And so I leave the task undone. And then I may start another task in the middle of that because my brain says, oh, you can do this. And then getting hijacked one more time. I mean, I spent yesterday finishing probably 4 or 5 things that I started during the week because I just couldn't complete them.
And what got you to the point where you were able to start them yesterday?
Um, it was a lot of self-talk that, you got to get your act together. Um, these things need to get done. It's not just my task, but it's a task for that includes other people. And so just just concentrate and do it.
Buckle
And
down, Karen, get it done.
yeah, exactly.
All
You
right,
know,
very, very friendly voice.
yep, yep.
Not. Okay. And then, so how did you feel as you were approaching that fork in the road where you might do it or you might not do it, even in
Um,
that moment?
I just knew that no matter how it turned out, I had to do it. And I
And
was willing, interestingly though, yesterday I was willing not to be perfect at it. It was just like, get these things done. So one thing that I had to do, I had to write an article um, for an organization that I just joined. And it was due by this morning. And I started it last week. And it just wasn't flowing, wasn't getting what I needed to do. Stopped it twice last week. Yesterday, when I told myself, you have to do this and you have to do it now, I think I came up with one of the best pieces I think I've ever written. But I was tense the whole time I was doing it.
So what's the lesson you learned here?
Um, I work under stress.
And what does that mean to you?
um, it means that I really don't want to fail at things. So when push comes to shove, I just find a way to do it. But I don't want to be that way.
So just thinking through the part that first step that got you to do it, besides the, self-talk, beating yourself up, what made it flow this time?
Um, well, I guess it was the energy I was giving myself to sit down and do it. First it was the self talk, and then the self talk turned into energy, and the energy got me really thinking um, and exploring different ways of putting it all together. And, it felt good at the end, not during it. During it, I still felt I was going in too many directions, but as it turned out, I wasn't. I was going in all the right directions to get what I needed.
So the lesson, if I, were watching it, would be that the starting was the key,
Yeah.
not
Oh, yeah.
the self-talk and all of that. It was just getting it started because then it started to flow a little bit, and then you could pick and choose some of your the pieces and
Right.
follow it. And by giving yourself permission to, I always say, dare to be ugly. By giving
Yep.
your self permission, if you came up with garbage, that was better than nothing.
Oh, exactly. Because,
Nothing wasn't getting you anywhere. It was
yeah,
getting you
nothing was
nothing.
getting me
Right.
anywhere. And I figured if it turned out in my mind to be garbage, I'd probably be more motivated to fix it.
But you would
Um,
have something to fix
right. Exactly.
because you had started. Yeah, and it reminds me of something somebody told me decades ago. It's like frightening how many decades ago. And they said, just say to yourself, you're not going to do it now, but if you were going to do it, what would you do? And that's almost always gotten me over the hump. Not completely. But it's just like, okay, the pressure's off because on some level, the doing seems gargantuan or it seems too big. I don't have it in me now, or, insert your own, words, self-talk and so on. So were there times before where you were getting triggered about doing this? I mean, you mentioned that you had attempted it a couple of times. So um,
Um,
what got you to try to do it before? Was it on a checklist or
well, it was, on my sticky note, along with a couple other sticky notes of things I had to do. Um, truthfully, I wasn't feeling, um, I don't know if adequate's the right word or not, but I just didn't feel like I was I could perform at my best last week. And I kept giving myself excuses that, well, you're not at your best. That's why you're not completing these things. You're not at your best. That's why you don't like what you're working on. Um, and I don't like saying that to myself, but that's how I felt. And yesterday, um, I had gone up to the pool for about an hour and I came back home. Rich wasn't here, so I was by myself. And it was almost like I was saying, okay, you took that hour at the pool. Now it's time to get to work and you can do it. But I don't know what physically or mentally changed since last week, why I felt so inadequate last week. But yesterday it was, I'm just going to do it and it's going to get done.
Yeah, and you can go back over it, but you had told me just briefly before we started that you were kind of in a sense of overwhelm for the last couple of weeks. So
Right.
maybe it was a cumulative thing, and it's hard to know where to start when you have so many things to start. Which one do you choose? And sometimes it's just throwing a dart. When they all are seemingly important. To give yourself some grace there. Talking in terms of, salience and so on, is there anything else that you might think of that you could either proactively create as a trigger point that it has a positive association with it, that if I do X, tag something, more or less mentally tag something, um, and make it conspicuous, that then you have permission to something that's inviting or that you could make pleasant. So, for instance, I used to go into the office on Sunday mornings very, very early, and just to catch up for the week, clean up for the week, and plan for the remainder of the week. And I loved going there. Nobody else was there. I generally would have my hot tea in the morning, and I would have really great music playing just nicely in the background. And I would feel, I have to admit, almost smug being there so early and working. And it was just all the external things were primed to put me in the zone. All right. So anything like that can work for you?
Well, typically, um, me coming into the office, closing the door, um, basically closing out the world other than either my podcast, my clients, or my writing. I feel, this is my zone and it encourages me. But there are little things occasionally, and, now that I'm saying this, most of last week I was home alone. So the office door was open. And that didn't give me the privacy that I typically have when I close the door.
Yeah,
And
so maybe
I did
that's
it,
maybe that's the little incentive salient point here that is the cue for you. Like I'm buckled in. I'm ready to work. And I have the same feeling if I'm in I remember, when I was in law school studying, if I was in an open space with lots of space behind me, I felt that I needed to be kind of on guard or aware of what was behind me. But I found a place in the lower level of the law library where I would go, and it was in the back, in the corner, and just a nice little nook. And it had a great light just on the stuff, and it was dark all around. Otherwise, and it was just perfect for studying.
yeah, now that I think about it, I'm not sure why I was working with the door open all last week, but I
Well,
was.
you shut the door if it's your place and Rich isn't around.
Yeah. Well, and even sometimes when he is around, I keep the door open,
Mm,
but
mhm.
not for not for work that's really important. And even yesterday, he wasn't here. And when I came into the office, I closed the door. And, maybe that was, telling my brain without me thinking about it, okay, now you're ready to get to work.
Yeah, so it's just a hypothesis, but might be fun to kind of notice when it's a little easier or hot and cold, Goldilocks method of does this work better? Does this work less well, and so on. So some of the other things we can be thinking about just to kind of tie up some of these concepts is, it's the idea is we have these things that are catching our attention, whether we're consciously aware of it or not, and they stand out to us. They have some significance, some association for us, some connection, and it's either for a reward or um, relief from tension or anxiety. And we can be proactively creating some of these things and very proactively aware of how the other things that have just manifested themselves um, exist in our life and how they may divert us, kind of like a pinball machine that we think we're going in, left, and we ping against a pin and then we
Right.
get redirected to something else. And then we can be proactively paying attention to how this is influencing our motivation and our ability to follow through and then navigate through these things that uh, want to hijack us from the things that we say are important to us. So going forward, what do you think you're going to do with that door?
Um, I think I'm going to try to remember that I want it closed for me to get my work done. Um, and it's strange because normally I do close it. But as I was sitting here trying to visualize what was different, um, I realized, oh, the door was open. And one of the things I do on purpose, if I'm not working on something that has a deadline or it's not really business related and I'm in the office, I automatically keep the door open because it's like I can be interrupted. I can do other things. So I'm sure that sort of played on me last week. But again, I wasn't thinking about it. I wasn't intentional about my surroundings.
Well, and again, it's just a perfect example of how something that's seemingly insignificant, and maybe it is, Karen. I mean, we don't know, but if it gets us to move in the direction towards the warmer, assuming that's what we want, warmer or just the right direction, then why not use it as that, and pay attention to where some of the other things can show up. And it can be music, it could be, a color, it could be like flowers on the desk, it could be I don't know, doing jumping jacks before we can create these things proactively, or at a minimum, just be aware that there are these things that we're kind of standing in our way. And, there's that, remember from some of the other podcasts, we talked about WHOOP, what is our wish? What's the specific outcome we want?
Right.
What are the obstacles that can get in the way? And what's our plan B if it should occur? Or some of the other ideas that we can use to kind of problem solve, just like we did in the conversation.
I love it. Well, now I
So what would you tell
need to
others, the listeners to do?
pardon.
You said what would be your recommendation from this conversation that we had today that our listeners might take on?
Well, I think one of the things, if you find yourself not on the track that you think you want to be on, um, you need to step back and need to start asking yourself questions about why you're not there or how can you get there. It's not as important as why you're not there, but how can you get there. um, and that's basically what I did yesterday when I came home from the pool. It was like, I need to do this. And whether it was a total conscious thought of how I was going to do it, it still was a thought that I'm going to do this and I'm going to get it done. Um, and I think sometimes we get lazy when things don't fall into place, that we want to push them away. because, it takes too much thought to try to figure out the answers.
And it's
And
called avoidance.
yeah, and I know that's not good for me, because if I had continued yesterday and had avoided doing what I had to do, I knew what the consequences were going to be today when that organization didn't get what I promised them that they would get. And I didn't want that to happen. So think about the consequences. Are they good for you? Are they bad for you? And what can you do to avoid bad consequences?
Well, and in the context of the conversation today, be aware of those cues that are there that are either holding us in that avoidance pattern or could get us over the threshold, over the little lump to getting more in the direction of what we want. So,
Absolutely. Well, I think I need a new sticky on my computer, which I'm going to put there today. And it's going to remind me to be intentional. Because I look back at last week and I was intentional in not doing things. But I think if that's on my computer, it will remind me, to ask myself the questions and do what is necessary.
Sounds good to me.
All right. So today we talked about the incentive salience, which is like the brain's GPS. It directs your attention and energy, often without your awareness. Well, we all heard I was not aware. When you start to notice it and learn to steer it, you can gain access to a powerful tool for change. Remember, it's not just about working harder, it's about making your goals feel magnetic. I like that. If you're ready to explore how to shift your internal compass and stop self-sabotaging, check out our self-sabotage to self-command boot camp. Get on the list for more information by sending your email to Candace@theintentionalitygurus.com. Until next time, stay intentional. And all this information is in the show notes. So please sign up, because I can't wait for the boot camp to start.
Sounds good. Take care, Karen.
Have a great day. Bye-bye now.